The H1B guy here. And today, the H1B guy with Jaime Rabbior, head of marketing at MobSquad, debunking myths about Canada. It's part two of our series with Jamie, and we're going to dive right into a few myths about Canada. But before we get started, I'd like to ask you, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the H1B Guy channel here on YouTube and like this video so that I can continue to produce more content like this for you. I also wanted to mention the H1B Guy offers a variety of consulting services. I help businesses and individuals solve complex work authorization issues in the recruitment process while bringing awareness to employment based immigration benefits. If I can help you, please reach out. I'd love to hear how. And you can book an appointment directly with me via the h1bguy.com. Today's post is brought to you exclusively by Mob Squad. Are you a technology professional facing US work visa related challenges? Don't leave your fate up to chance. Our partner Mob Squad has a solution. Join the squad. Well, Jamie, thanks for joining me here today on part two of our series. How you doing?
I'm doing well, Robert. How are you?
Awesome. Thank you so much. As I mentioned earlier at the beginning of the video, we're going to debunk some myths about Canada. And so
Let's do
we've
it.
broken this down into to three parts. And that is, we're going to cover cost of living. We're going to talk about Canadian infrastructure as well as the weather. So, Jamie, I wanted to jump right into cost of living. And I think when we look at Canada being a North American country, very similar to the U.S. in terms of overall demographics from a cost of living perspective. But I know some things can be a little different and maybe fluctuate. And when we're talking about relocation of occupation, right, and relocating your family, there are some things that I think are worth mentioning in terms of a comparison and contrast to the US. So I'm going to turn it over to you and let you jump right into what are some of the differences in the overall cost of living between Canada and the US.
This is a question we're getting a lot about, right? There's a lot of emphasis and a lot of questions about cost of living rising. And It's it is happening in Canada, absolutely, but we're not isolated from it. Some of the areas I would love to just point out: cost of housing.
Mhm,
Cost of housing in the in the big cities here in Canada have definitely gone up. Looking at Toronto, Vancouver, I know a
mhm,
lot of press gets said about them. But
mhm,
really, what you don't see is those are still very, very comparable to a lot of the big cities in the US, like New
mhm,
York, like San Francisco,
mhm,
where a lot of tech professionals live and work. So comparable, but yes, on the
mhm,
rise.
mhm,
Cost of food, again, is very similar across the US, and it really does depend on what city you're in.
mhm,
Um, Things like health insurance, though, that is one area where Canada really wins. It is we have free healthcare, which
mhm,
is very different than what the US can offer.
mhm,
Also, our education system, if you are looking to go to school, our education system is much more affordable than that in the US. So it
mhm,
really depends. And again, it's going to depend on what city you're in,
mhm,
where you're located. So, for example, Vancouver, Toronto being our biggest cities, those
mhm,
do cost more money to live in them. But
mhm,
the nice thing is there's suburbs, there's smaller
mhm,
towns right outside of the major cities that are
mhm,
more affordable. And we find that our current employees can absolutely find the communities that make the most
mhm,
sense for them and their lifestyle and what they're looking for. Cities like Calgary, for example, another growing tech hub here in Canada. It's a more affordable city, but has everything you need. It is a big city. It's close to the
mhm,
mountains.
mhm,
Has a lot to offer, but it is more affordable for
mhm,
families, as well as Halifax. Halifax is over on the East Coast,
mhm,
oceanfront, beautiful.
mhm,
It is more
mhm,
affordable for families, for individuals looking for not to be in one of the major cities like Toronto.
mhm,
So again, yes, cost of living is on the rise, but I would
mhm.
just say it is not just isolated to Canada.
Yeah, I think it's very comparable in terms of what we've seen here. And, as you mentioned, Vancouver compares to San Francisco, and, Toronto to New York. I would compare like a Calgary to like a Denver or a Dallas or an Atlanta. Uh, Halifax, maybe on a smaller scale to like a Miami or even a Boston on a smaller scale would be kind of my comparisons. So really good point, and that kind of leads into the four pillars, right? We talk about housing, food, clothing, transportation. And transportation kind of leads into our next one, which is overall infrastructure,
Yeah.
and Canadian infrastructure, and having access to reliable transportation and navigable roads. Can you hit on the Canadian infrastructure as it compares to maybe some of the myths that we've heard?
It's one of the things, the major things we hear when newcomers have just landed with us here in Canada is just really how similar Canada is to the US.
Hmm.
That's always one of the biggest things that people say. I really thought it was going to be more of a shock, more of a switch over, was expecting access to different things, but really, we're not that different. We
Hmm.
have good roads, we have big buildings, we have great transportation systems. That's
Hmm.
actually one area where a lot of our employees actually comment that
Hmm.
they feel so much safer, and that our subway and train systems, bus systems are much cleaner than those that they've experienced in the US. So we are a developed country. We have everything you could ever need. We have all the major apps.
Hmm.
Um, your lifestyle, if you're currently in the US, will really not change that much.
Hmm.
And we can really offer a lot,
Hmm.
in terms of not just infrastructure, but just the beauty of our country with the mountains
Hmm.
and the oceans and the forests and the lakes and ponds. So there's
Hmm.
more beyond the infrastructure. But
Hmm.
um, it feels very, very similar to the US.
Yeah. Yeah, and I've heard that many times, which I've always come back to and joked about. Right, I live in Atlanta, Georgia, and definitely have lived all of my life in the Southeast United States, and um, every time I've had conversations around Canada, I joke about the weather, right? And that's because if it's cooler than 70 degrees, that's cold to us. So wanted to kind of hit on this one a little bit because as I've had the conversations around it, I know all four seasons exist, and I know a lot of it can be regional depending on the parts of the country that you're in, right? So I know Canadians don't live in igloos, Jamie, but can you maybe talk a little bit about what the climate, the weather is like in Canada?
You're not alone, Robert. A lot. This is one of the most common questions we get is it really that cold?
Yeah.
And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It can get cold, but I will
Hmm.
also say it's also not that bad. If you live, especially in the northern states, it's very, very similar. So, for
Yeah.
example, Seattle, Vancouver
Hmm.
is very similar to Seattle weather.
Hmm.
It's wet, it's more damp, but it
Yeah.
doesn't go below 0 degrees Celsius very often.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um, Calgary is one of the colder cities here in Canada, but again, it's also super sunny. So
Hmm.
you get over 300 days of sunshine every single day, beautiful hot summers.
Hmm.
Toronto, again, is quite mild winters. You get
Hmm.
snow, but it's also really beautiful. You make the
Hmm.
most of it. You learn to
Yeah.
ski, you hit
Yep.
up the mountains. So I would say I do find that weather is one of those things that do get a bad rap, so I'm happy
Hmm.
we're talking about it.
Yeah.
Yes, is it California? No, but we have beautiful summers, beautiful springs, and the winters are just you just got to make the most of them. Invest
Hmm.
in some good winter coat and winter boots, and you are good to go.
Well, Jamie, I think the key takeaway here is that a really good winter coat and some winter boots in your wardrobe will help you survive probably those 2 or 3 months where things can get a little dicey, right?
Totally.
So
It's all about being prepared,
yeah,
no matter where you are.
it is, and I think when we look at some of the extreme temps in other parts of the U.S. that are extremely hot, right? There can be some comparison and contrast there. So it
100%.
really is a matter of where you're located, right? As you said, Calgary being on the very northern side of the country versus Vancouver, which has a climate very comparable to Seattle, as you mentioned. Um, but I think it's really good for the audience to hear that Canadians don't live in igloos and that life is very comparable to what life is like here in the U.S. Well, Jamie, thanks for joining me for part two of this series. Really appreciate it. And make sure for those of you that have already checked out part one, tune back in for the biggest differences between the US and Canadian immigration system. For more employment based immigration benefits surrounding H1Bs, as well as permanent residency pathways to the green cards here in the US, please check out the H1BGuy.com. And wanted to remind everyone that today's post is brought to you exclusively by MobSquad. Are you a technology professional facing US work visa related challenges? Don't leave your fate up to chance. Our partner MobSquad has the solution. MobSquad helps technology professionals facing US work visa related uncertainty remain working with their current US employer nearshore from Canada, as well as technology professionals from around the world who are seeking to find a rewarding opportunity in North America. Through their partnership with the Canadian government, they can obtain a Canadian work permit for you and your spouse in as little as 4 to 6 weeks. So, whether you're looking to stay working with your current US employer or you want to find a new opportunity in Canada, please find out how the team at Mob Squad can help you via the link in the video description below. Join the squad. And also wanted to mention if you want to check out Mob Squad directly, you can do so via mobsquad.io. If you haven't already, please like this video, subscribe to the H1B Guy channel here on YouTube, and click the bell for notifications. For Jamie, I'm Robert, the H1B Guy, your global source for all things H1B.